Hello, my name is Carrie Mounty, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank the Sub-Saharan AOAC for allowing us the opportunity to discuss our QualiT toolbox that we use in our mycotoxin laboratory. Trilogy Analytical began in 1999 as a laboratory specializing in mycotoxin analysis. Today, we continue that niche analysis specialization by doing between 30,000 and 50,000 analysis each year for mycotoxins. The tools that you will see today in this QualiT toolbox are some that we use every day at Trilogy. As we designed our quality system, most of the tools that we use were also things that our clients would use as well. The system was developed to be practical and meaningful because we knew that in order for a system to be used routinely, both of those things were critical. In addition, it needs to be ISO compliant and also always strive for the continual improvement that is part of that ISO requirement. And finally, because everything needs to have a financial responsibility, the system can be expanded as much or as little as is needed by the total lab. So the budgetary issues can be handled as well. The first tool in our QualiT toolbox are quality control samples. These are agricultural commodities such as corn or beans, rice, barley, things like that, that we can find that are naturally contaminated with mycotoxins. Those samples are procured and then very finely ground. We fine grind the materials in order that the entire lot will pass the 30 mesh screen. After the grinding process, samples are very thoroughly mixed, and then subsamples are taken to characterize the total lot. We analyze 30 different samples over the course of 5 or 6 different analytical runs. We use these for run acceptance tools, analyst training samples, and daily QC samples, just to name a few. Using quality control materials right alongside analytical samples is a great way to audit your full method every day. When samples are weighed out and run through the method, both the balance and all of the components that go into the method, from pipetters and solvents, right down to your instrumentation and your result calculations, are checked. By taking 30 analyses and coming up with your own average, data can be plotted so that run acceptance criteria can be derived from all of the QC data that has been generated. These quality control materials are extremely stable, and because of that, the same material can be used over many months or even years. This allows comparisons over the course of many different methods, many different solvent lots, all types of variables that liquid standards can really not handle. So by taking this charted data, it will provide the ability to identify trends in any analytical method that you may have. Another use of quality control materials is for analyst training. Part of the ISO 17025-2017 standard requires documentation of initial technician training as well as ongoing competency verification. Using quality control materials that are already being used in the lab is a great way to do training without any additional paperwork or documentation. The chart that you see on this slide shows 3 different analysts that have been trained with the same material over the course of 20 different analytical runs. For training, each analyst must take a sample each day and run that sample and plot the data. With these runs, the results must fall within a 2 standard deviation range for the analyst to be considered trained on that specific method. One of the great things about this method of analyst training is that it is measurable, objective, and it's applicable not only for the initial training, but it also documents ongoing competency. By sending quality control materials back through the laboratory as a blind sample, this documents the competency requirement as required in those ISO standards. The second tool in the QualiT toolbox are proficiency testing programs. Proficiency programs are essential for all 17025 laboratories. There are 2 equally important components to each PT round. The first and most obvious component is the PT sample itself. When a laboratory enrolls in a PT round, it receives a PT sample along with a questionnaire. The questions on this questionnaire are things like what method was used, what extraction procedure was used, and perhaps how many grams of sample were extracted. This data, along with the value that the laboratory obtained for this sample, are then compiled and returned to the agency that is conducting the PT round. That agency will then assemble the report that compiles all of the data from each laboratory that participated in the round. Proficiency testing is an excellent tool because it provides real-world feedback for laboratories and for analysts on a scheduled basis. By being able to see the result generated by a variety of different laboratories using a variety of different methods, it allows each individual participant to see how that result that they generated measures up. You always want to make sure that you are able to review each of these PT reports carefully, as they contain very valuable information. Look for the number of participants, check the range of results. You also want to check to see if perhaps there's a bimodal distribution and that some methods may have a bias. All of these types of data can be gleaned from a good PT result report. Also, equally valuable as that PT report is any additional sample that's left over. Just as we talked about the quality control materials, these PT samples can be used for training or evaluating different methods or extraction procedures, or simply sending back through a laboratory as a blind sample to prove competency. These samples also make a good sample to send to an outside vendor. That vendor may be providing a raw material where they also provide the mycotoxin results on that material, or it may be another laboratory where confirmations are sent. Regardless of the vendor, the laboratory sending the sample out will know the assigned value of that sample and can compare that result with the result that's returned to them. A third tool in the QualiT toolbox are certified reference materials. These, along with quality control materials, have a place in the laboratory when doing method validations, troubleshooting, and anytime you need complete traceability. Certified reference materials, also known as CRMs, as well as quality control materials, are available as naturally contaminated materials, or as liquid standards. Certified reference materials are accompanied by a certificate that establishes that metrological traceability as well as details the uncertainty of that particular material. Many accrediting bodies and regulatory agencies require laboratories to use certified reference materials when they are available to establish acceptable ranges by using that uncertainty in their calculations. Certified reference materials can be used for things such as instrument calibration or validating methods, or when doing result comparisons, or just looking at accuracy. One way we wanted to mention that quality control materials can be used in a troubleshooting manner is by doing something that we refer to as a 10 by 10. You'll notice in the grid on our slide that there are 10 extracts across the top of the slide and 10 replicates down the slide. The extracts across the top in blue represent 10 samples that have been extracted 10 individual times. The data represented in green represents one extract that has been analyzed 10 times. By looking at the average and the relative standard deviation for each of these different extracts, you can tell what the relative standard deviation of the method is as compared to the relative standard deviation of the sample. This is great information to determine if your sample is not homogeneous enough to be analyzed and more sample preparation needs to be done, or if your method for some reason is more variable than you anticipate. At Trilogy, we typically do a 10 by 10 on every method annually. This gives us real-world information on our methods as well as some of the materials that we analyze routinely. This allows us also to see quickly if we have a situation where we need to look more closely at the variability of our methods. And finally, what I'd like to highlight is how all of the components of the QualiT Toolbox can come together to support a total quality program. As some of you may know, in the United States currently, we have experienced the death of between 70 and 100 dogs as a result of aflatoxin getting into a pet food that was released into the market. I want to emphasize that this is not concerning that specific company. Unfortunately, over the last 20+ years, many times we have seen aflatoxin enter the market in pet food. One such company we worked with several years ago. This company, unfortunately, received a load of corn that was contaminated at a high level of aflatoxin. That load entered the facility undetected and was incorporated into a pet food that was released into the market. This company requested Trilogy to do a large amount of testing as this entire situation unfolded. After that recall, and the company was able to start kind of again with a new quality control approach, they asked Trilogy to help set up something that could help mitigate their risk. What happened then is we used some quality control material to use as their training sample. They used this on both the lateral flow and ELISA type kits that they used on incoming product. In addition, we prepared a custom quality control material made of a base of their specific pet food that we incorporated a known amount of aflatoxin in. This material could be used on testing of release of their final product into the market. Quality control material was used for run acceptance on incoming and outgoing materials. At their many locations, analysts were enrolled in PT programs so that each analyst could see how they compared against the other analysts in that specific company, because it was a custom PT program. This gave them confidence that the results that they were generating were actually really good and accurate, and if any analyst performed underneath the required result, they could be retrained. Trilogy ran confirmations for this company when anything was above a threshold, or when they ended up with unusual matrices or difficult matrices, or new products, new agricultural type commodities that came into the marketplace that we really didn't have a lot of information on. This was a great success story because as the company moved forward, they were able to mitigate the risk, and they have had a very successful run of providing high quality products to the market ever since. Thank you so much for your attention. We will be able to answer any questions that you may have during our roundtable conversations coming up shortly.